I'm Hazel, 34, standing frozen at my sister's lakeside cabin entrance. The 5-year family estrangement was supposed to end today. My mother's invitation had seemed genuine. But now Lauren blocks the doorway, her manicured finger pointing at my chest. "Why did you come with your maggots? There's no room. Get lost." My children shrink behind me, Jimmy clutching my jacket, little Jenna's eyes filling with tears. I feel the blood drain from my face as Lauren's words echo across the pristine porch. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever dealt with toxic family members, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors. This journey gets intense, but I promise there's light at the end. The invitation that upended our lives arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. I was working from our small Chicago apartment, the kind where the kitchen doubles as a laundry room and the kids share not just a bedroom but a twin bed. It wasn't perfect, but we had made it home after Richard walked out 3 years ago, leaving nothing but divorce papers and unpaid bills. I was checking Jimmy's math homework while simultaneously trying to answer work emails when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years: Mom. Hazel. Her voice sounded older, softer than I remembered. It's been too long. 5 years, 2 months, and 14 days to be exact. Not since Dad's funeral, when Lauren had made it clear I wasn't welcome in the family circle anymore. "I'm calling because we're having the annual family trip to the cabin on Lake Superior next month," she continued, as if we'd spoken just last week. "I think it's time you and the children joined us. The kids should know their cousins, don't you think?" I nearly dropped the phone. The annual family vacation was legendary. A 2-week extravaganza at Lauren's luxury lake house. In the past, these trips had been filled with boating, bonfires, and family photos that would populate Lauren's perfect social media presence for months afterward. "Everyone will be there," Mom added, when I didn't immediately respond. "Jason and Patricia, their boys. Even Aunt Mildred is flying in from Arizona." "Mom, I don't know if that's a good idea," I said. Carefully, memories of Lauren's cold shoulder and Jason's averted eyes at Dad's funeral still fresh. Things haven't exactly been warm between us. "Water under the bridge," Mom dismissed with the wave in her voice that I could picture perfectly. Family is family. Lauren specifically mentioned wanting to reconnect. That was the first red flag I should have noticed. Lauren had never wanted to reconnect with me. Not when I needed help after Richard left, not when Jimmy was hospitalized with pneumonia last winter, not when I'd reached out on her birthday with an olive branch. But the hopeful faces of my children when I mentioned the invitation made my decision for me. "Is that Grandma Jimmy?" had asked, his 8-year-old face lighting up with curiosity. He barely remembered her. "Can we go? Will there be other kids?" "Your cousins," I explained. "Jacob and Madison are your Uncle Jason's kids, and Aunt Lauren has Tyler and Brooke." Real cousins. Jenna's eyes went wide as if I'd told her unicorns existed. At 6, her concept of family came mostly from storybooks and TV shows, the kind with big holiday gatherings and matching pajamas. Not our reality of missed child support payments and double shifts at the insurance agency where I worked. I called Rachel my best friend since college and the only person who had stuck by me through the divorce and aftermath. "It's a trap," she warned immediately. "Why now, after all this time?" "Mom says Lauren wants to reconnect," I repeated doubtfully. "And you believe that Rachel's skepticism was palpable. The same Lauren who told everyone at your father's funeral that you were only there for the inheritance? Maybe she's changed," I suggested weakly. Rachel sighed. "Just be careful, Hayes. And if you need an extraction plan, I'm 1 phone call away." Rachel even loaned me $500 for the trip expenses, money I couldn't spare from our tight budget. I used it to buy new clothes for the kids, a small gift for my mother, and to get our ancient Honda Civic checked for the long drive from Chicago to northern Michigan. The whole way there, I prepped the kids like we were diplomats entering hostile territory. Remember, your cousins might have different toys than you're used to. Be respectful of their things. Madison and Jacob are a bit older than you, Jimmy. If they don't want to play, don't take it personally. Aunt Lauren likes things very clean, so we'll be extra careful not to make messes. What I didn't say, your aunt thinks we're beneath her. Your grandma abandoned us when we needed her most. Your uncle pretends we don't exist. As we drove deeper into the forested peninsula, following the GPS, down increasingly private roads, Jimmy pressed his face to the window, gasping at glimpses of the sparkling lake beyond the trees. Jenna had fallen asleep, clutching the small music box her father had given her before he left, one of the few precious objects we had kept through our financial struggles. I allowed myself to hope just a little. Maybe this trip would heal old wounds. Maybe my children would finally have the extended family I'd always wanted for them. Maybe I could repair whatever had broken between me and my siblings. The massive cedar and glass structure that appeared at the end of the private drive crushed those hopes instantly. Lauren's cabin looked like something from Architectural Digest. 3 stories of luxury perched on a cliff overlooking Lake Superior. 4 expensive cars were parked in the circular driveway, and I could see figures moving behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. I parked our battered Civic behind a gleaming Range Rover, feeling immediately out of place. As I helped the kids out smoothing Jenna's rumpled sundress and fixing Jimmy's collar, a weight settled in my stomach. I should have listened to Rachel. This was definitely a mistake. Breathe, I whispered to myself as we approached the imposing front door of Lauren's lake house. The building was even more intimidating up close. Native stone foundation exposed, timber beams, custom ironwork on the balconies. The cabin likely cost more than I would earn in my lifetime. Jimmy tugged at my hand. Mom, is this really where Aunt Lauren lives? Just for vacations, I explained, remembering that my sister's primary residence was an even larger home in Chicago's North Shore. The kind of wealth that came from marrying a hedge fund manager and then multiplying it through the family business she and Jason had somehow taken control of after Dad died. I adjusted the small gift bag in my hand. A locally made candle I'd picked up at our last rest stop, suddenly aware of how pathetic it seemed compared to our surroundings. Still, I rang the doorbell, its deep chime echoing inside. The door swung open to reveal Lauren, my sister, though you'd hardly know we share DNA. While I wore Target jeans and had let my brown hair go its natural wavy way, Lauren was a polished statue, sleek blonde bob linen dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, not a wrinkle or pore visible on her face, despite being 2 years my senior. For one frozen moment, she stared at us as if we were door-to-door salespeople interrupting her day. Then her eyes narrowed. "Why did you come with your maggots?" she hissed, her gaze flicking to Jimmy and Jenna cowering behind me. "There's no room. Get lost." The words hit like physical blows. Maggots. My children. My beautiful, innocent children. Lauren, Mom invited us, I stammered, wondering if there had been some terrible miscommunication. She said. I don't care what she said, Lauren cut me off. This is my house, and I decide who stays here. Behind her, I glimpsed my mother approaching. Surely she would clear this up. Mom relief flooded my voice. There seems to be some confusion about the invitation. Deborah Reynolds appeared beside Lauren, her face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. Hazel, darling, you're here. Wonderful. Her words were right, but her tone was all wrong, the same voice she used when accepting subpar service at restaurants. Lauren says there's no room for us, I explained, still believing this must be a misunderstanding. My mother's eyes slid away from mine. Well, the main house is quite full with everyone. But we've prepared the garden cottage for you. Garden cottage. The term conjured images of something quaint and charming. I would later discover she meant the dilapidated tool shed behind the boat garage. You can't possibly expect them to stay in the main house, Lauren added, as if I weren't standing right there. Not with the Blakemores coming for dinner tomorrow. What would they think? The Blakemores. Of course. My sister's obsession with appearances meant that her wealthy friends' opinions mattered more than her own flesh and blood. From deeper in the house came my brother Jason, holding a crystal tumbler of what looked like expensive scotch. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, mumbling something about checking on the boats. Jason the first called hoping for at least a hello, but he disappeared through a side door without acknowledging me. Look, you're here now, Lauren sighed dramatically. You can help in the kitchen during the gatherings. We're short-staffed this year since Maria couldn't come up from the city. The realization hit me like ice water. I hadn't been invited as family. I'd been invited as unpaid help. Mom, I looked to Deborah, hoping for some intervention, but she merely patted Lauren's arm. Let me show Hazel to the cottage, dear. I'm sure they're tired from their drive. The garden cottage turned out to be exactly what I feared. A weathered shed that had been hastily outfitted with 2 army cots, a space heater, and a camping lamp. No bathroom, no running water. Not even proper insulation against the chilly lake winds. The main bathroom in the boat garage is available for your necessities, my mother explained, not quite meeting my eyes. Meals are at 8, 1, and 7 inches the main house, though perhaps you'd be more comfortable eating separately considering. Considering what, Mom, I asked, watching Jimmy investigate a suspicious stain on one of the cots. She merely smoothed her expensive slacks. I've left some clean towels. Do join us for breakfast tomorrow. Lauren mentioned needing help preparing for the afternoon boat outing. With that, she was gone, leaving us standing in our glorified shed as the sun began to set over Lake Superior. Mom, Jenna's small voice broke through my shock. I'm hungry. Dinner apparently wasn't included in our first night's welcome. Thankfully, I'd packed emergency granola bars and juice boxes in our luggage. A habit from years of single parenting with limited resources. As the kids huddled on one cot sharing our meager provisions, I overheard Lauren's voice floating from the open windows of the main house. Only here to help in the kitchen anyway. Did you see their clothes? And that car, honestly, if she'd made better choices like marrying someone stable instead of that loser Richard. I closed the shed's rickety window, but not before catching my mother's murmured agreement. The night was long and cold in our unheated cottage. I gave the kids the single blanket we'd been provided, watching their breath form small clouds in the chilly air. Jenna cried herself to sleep, confused and disappointed by the reception from the fairy tale family I'd promised her. Jimmy stayed silent, his young face already learning to mask hurt behind stoicism, a trait I recognized from my own childhood. As they finally drifted off, I sat on the edge of my cot wondering how I could have been so naive. Lauren's message had been clear: we weren't family. We were intruders, unwanted reminders of a connection she'd rather forget. But where did we go from here? With barely enough money for gas home and 2 disappointed children who deserved better, our options were painfully limited. I decided we would stay one night, reassess in the morning, and possibly cut our losses. I had no idea then that the ugly welcome was just the beginning of Lauren's carefully orchestrated humiliation. Morning brought no improvements to our situation. We woke stiff and cold in the garden shed, using bottled water to brush our teeth and the distant boat garage facilities for more pressing needs. The walk between buildings made it clear we were meant to stay out of sight, our path deliberately routed behind hedges and service areas, rather than through the manicured lakeside gardens where the real family would gather. Remember to use your best manners, I reminded Jimmy and Jenna as we approached the main house for breakfast, though my stomach twisted with each step. And stay close to me. The kitchen was a showcase of wealth, commercial-grade appliances, marble countertops, and a breakfast nook with panoramic lake views. My mother stood at the massive island arranging pastries on a silver tray while a coffee machine that looked more complex than my car hissed in the background. "There you are," she said, as if we'd merely stepped out for a moment rather than been exiled to a shed. "The children can sit at the island. The family is on the terrace." Family. A word that apparently didn't include us. "We'll all sit together, Mom," I insisted, quietly taking plates for the kids. My mother's lips tightened, but before she could respond, Lauren swept in wearing yoga clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Oh good, you're up. We need more coffee on the terrace, and someone needs to cut more fruit for the platters." She didn't even look at my children as she grabbed a bottled water from the refrigerator. "Lauren, could we talk for a moment?" I asked. "About yesterday and the sleeping arrangements." "What's there to talk about? We're at capacity with the Hansons arriving tomorrow. You're lucky we found space at all." She glanced at my wrinkled clothes with distaste. "Is that what you're wearing today? The Millers are coming for lunch." Before I could respond, Lauren accidentally bumped into me, sending her coffee splashing across my only nice blouse, a cream-colored button-up I'd carefully ironed for the trip. "Oh no," she said with exaggerated concern. "You should change before everyone sees you like that." Her eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. "I don't have anything else appropriate," I admitted, dabbing uselessly at the spreading stain. "Pity," Lauren replied, already turning away. "Perhaps stay in the kitchen then. Less embarrassing for everyone." As I helped my children navigate the elaborate breakfast spread, my brother Jason finally made an appearance. At 38, he looked every inch the successful businessman in his casual but expensive weekend wear. His wife Patricia followed their two children, Jacob 12 and Madison 10, trailing behind, already dressed for a day on the water in coordinating nautical outfits. Uncle Jason Jimmy called out hopefully, remembering the stories I'd told of the kind big brother who had once taught me to fish and build sandcastles. Jason startled, then gave a stiff nod in our direction before ushering his family to the terrace. Patricia didn't even acknowledge our existence. "Why won't they talk to us?" Jenna whispered, her small face crumpling. "They're just busy," I lied, heartbreak filling my chest. These people weren't just rejecting me. They were rejecting my innocent children who had done nothing wrong. As we ate at the kitchen island, clearly separated from the real family enjoying the lakefront view, I overheard snippets of conversation from the open terrace doors. Quarterly profits exceeded projections after the merger. Dad would be proud of how we've expanded Reynolds Enterprises. Opening the Singapore office was your best decision yet, Jason. Reynolds Enterprises, my father's company. The family business I'd been effectively cut out of after his death 5 years ago. The inheritance that had mysteriously diminished to almost nothing by the time the estate was settled. "You should have seen the cabin she's living in now," Mother Lauren's voice carried clearly. I had my assistant look it up. Barely 700 square feet for the three of them. Can you imagine? I felt my face burn with humiliation as my mother responded. "Well, she always did make impractical choices. Remember how she turned down business school to pursue that ridiculous art history degree, the art history degree my father had encouraged, telling me to follow my passion while he built the company for all of us to share someday." The conversation shifted to afternoon plans, boating, jet skiing, a catered lakeside lunch. None of which it became clear included us. When breakfast concluded, Lauren approached with a stack of towels. "These need washing. The machines are in the boat garage basement. And when you're done, the kitchen will need cleaning before lunch prep." Not even a pretense of asking. Just orders as if I were the hired help. "I brought my children here to spend time with family," I said quietly but firmly. "Not to be your unpaid housekeeper." Lauren's perfect features arranged themselves into a look of surprise. "But Mother said you were coming to help out. That's why we agreed to let you stay." The pieces clicked into place. My mother had never intended this to be a family reconciliation. She'd invited us under false pretenses, promising Lauren free labor while making me believe we were wanted as family. Why, I asked, looking between them. Why even invite us if this is how you planned to treat us? My mother at least had the grace to look uncomfortable, but Lauren merely shrugged. The regular staff couldn't make it this year. Mother thought you could use the money. Money. What money? I hadn't been offered any payment. An awkward silence fell as Lauren and my mother exchanged glances. Well, we assumed you'd be grateful for the opportunity considering your situation, my mother finally said. Perhaps a small stipend at the end of the visit. I felt sick. They hadn't just excluded us from the family. They'd brought us here to exploit us to reinforce the hierarchy Lauren had established with herself at the top and me firmly at the bottom. The day deteriorated from there. My children, excited to play with their cousins, were quickly disillusioned. I overheard Lauren's daughter Madison telling Jenna, "Mom says we shouldn't play with you because you don't even have proper lake clothes." Later, I found Jimmy sitting alone on the dock while Jacob and his friends used the paddleboards and kayaks. When I asked why he wasn't joining them, he simply said, "They told me those aren't for people like us." By afternoon, Lauren had orchestrated a complete disaster in the kitchen. She'd asked me to prepare a special dressing for lunch, then accidentally switched the salt for sugar, resulting in an inedible mess she made sure everyone knew was my creation. Hazel never did learn her way around a kitchen, she announced to the gathering of family friends on the terrace. Some women just aren't natural homemakers. I watched in horror as she discreetly took photos of the ruined lunch spread on her phone, undoubtedly to share with her social circle as evidence of my incompetence. The final humiliation came when guests arrived for dinner, wealthy neighbors and business associates Lauren was clearly trying to impress. As I helped serve appetizers, I realized with growing horror that Lauren was introducing me not as her sister, but as our help for the week. Hazel used to work in catering. She lied smoothly to the elegantly dressed couple accepting champagne flutes. Such a blessing to have experienced help during these gatherings. My children, meanwhile, had been seated at a plastic table set up in a corner of the massive dining room, far from the main table, where even the other children. Saturday, when I questioned this arrangement, Lauren whispered harshly, "They don't know how to behave at a formal dinner. It's for everyone's comfort." The evening's final blow came when I overheard Lauren instructing Jenna to address her cousins as Miss Madison and Master Jacob while serving them cookies. "Your mother works for us this week," she explained to my confused 6-year-old. "So you should show proper respect to your betters." That night, as I tucked my exhausted, confused children into their cots in the cold garden shed, Jimmy asked a question that broke my heart. "Mom, why doesn't our family like us?" I had no answer that wouldn't shatter their already damaged sense of belonging. So I simply held them close and promised tomorrow would be better. A lie I desperately wished I could make true. The morning of our second day, I woke with renewed determination. We would either establish boundaries and be treated with respect, or we would leave limited funds or not. I found my mother alone in the kitchen arranging flowers for the lunch table. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice low to avoid waking the still sleeping household, "about why we're really here." Deborah set down her shears with exaggerated care. "I don't know what you mean." "Lauren says you invited us to work as unpaid help. Is that true?" For a moment, I thought she might continue denying it, but then her shoulders slumped slightly. "It's not like that, Hazel. I just thought you need the connection to the family, especially after everything with Richard." Connection? I almost laughed. Being treated like servants isn't connection. Lauren is under a lot of pressure with the company expansion, my mother defended weakly. "And you know how important appearances are to her. More important than treating her own sister and niece and nephew with basic human dignity. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. The manipulative tears I'd seen throughout my childhood whenever she was confronted with uncomfortable truths. I just wanted the family together again. Is that so wrong I'm getting older, Hazel? I want peace before I'm gone. The guilt trip, her specialty. Make me the villain for pointing out their cruelty. If you wanted family unity, I said carefully, you wouldn't have let Lauren put us in an unheated shed or treat my children like second-class citizens. The accommodations are temporary, she insisted. If you just try harder to fit in with Lauren's expectations, her expectations that we accept abuse, that my children be treated as servants, my mother wiped away a strategic tear. You're overreacting. Lauren has graciously opened her home. Stop. I raised my hand. Just stop. This isn't generosity. This is a power play, and you're enabling it. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I glimpsed something harder in her eyes. What choice do I have? Lauren and Jason control everything now, the company, the family assets, my retirement. You walked away, Hazel. You chose art and that worthless husband over the family business. There it was, the truth behind years of exclusion. I hadn't played by their rules, so I deserved to be cast out. I didn't walk away, I corrected quietly. Dad encouraged me to follow my passion for art history. He promised there would always be a place for me in the company when I was ready. Well, he's not here anymore, is he? My mother snapped, then immediately composed herself. Please, Hazel, just help out for the 2 weeks. Earn your keep. Maybe Lauren will see your value. The implication was clear. My value was solely in my usefulness to Lauren. Before I could respond, Lauren herself swept into the kitchen already dressed for a day of leisure in white linen pants and a silk blouse. Oh, good, you're up, she said, ignoring our obvious tension. The Millers are bringing their yacht around at 11, so we'll need a picnic prepared. Something impressive, but not too fussy. When neither of us immediately responded, she added with artificial sweetness. Unless that's too complicated for you, Hazel, I know gourmet food preparation might be outside your current skill set. The challenge was clear. Refuse and confirm I wasn't good enough to be part of their world. Accept and submit to her authority. For my children's sake, for their chance at having any relationship with their extended family, I swallowed my pride. I can handle it, I said quietly. Lauren's smile didn't reach her eyes. Wonderful. And do see if you can find something less. Thrift store for your children to wear. The Millers' grandchildren will be joining us. After she left, my mother squeezed my arm. See, this is a chance to show your value. Value. As if my worth as a human being, and my children's, depended on our usefulness to Lauren. I spent the morning preparing an elaborate picnic, channeling all my frustration into creating something even Lauren couldn't criticize. The children helped where they could, Jimmy, carefully slicing strawberries, while Jenna arranged cookies on platters. Just as we finished, Jason appeared in the kitchen, the first time he'd directly approached me since our arrival. Looks good, he said, awkwardly gesturing to the picnic spread. Thanks, I replied, waiting for more. Some acknowledgement of our relationship, perhaps. An explanation for his coldness. He shifted uncomfortably. How's work? Mom mentioned, you're at an insurance company now. Admin assistant at Midwest Insurance, I confirmed. It pays the bills, most of them anyway. Jason nodded, glancing toward the door as if planning his escape. And the kids, they're doing good. They'd be better if their uncle acknowledged their existence, I said quietly. Guilt flashed across his face. Hazel, it's complicated. With Lauren and the business. What about the business, Jason? I interrupted. Dad always said it would support all of us. Jason's expression shuddered. Things changed after he died. The recession hit, investments tanked. There wasn't much left to split 3 ways. A convenient explanation I might have believed if I hadn't overheard them discussing record profits on the terrace. And that required cutting me out of the family completely, not even a phone call when Richard left. When I was struggling to keep a roof over my kids' heads, Lauren thought it was better to make a clean break, he mumbled. Said you made your choice when you married Richard against her advice. Before I could process this revelation, that Lauren had orchestrated my exclusion as punishment for my marriage, my daughter's scream cut through the air. I rushed outside to find Jenna in tears, clutching her broken music box. The precious gift from her father, now shattered on the stone patio. What happened? I demanded, gathering my sobbing child into my arms. She wasn't supposed to have toys at the adult gathering, Lauren said dismissively. I was simply moving it inside when it slipped. These things happen. But the satisfied gleam in her eye told a different story. This was deliberate. Another way to assert control to hurt what mattered to me. The yacht excursion that followed was an exercise in calculated exclusion. While the family enjoyed the upper deck with champagne and the picnic, I'd prepared my children and I were relegated to the lower level, served leftover breakfast pastries on paper plates. Isn't this fun? My mother said during her brief visit below deck, as if we should be grateful for the crumbs of inclusion. By evening, the pattern was clear. Lauren had orchestrated a comprehensive campaign to solidify our outsider status. She announced a formal family photo shoot for the next day, explicitly telling the photographer in front of everyone. Just the immediate family, not the help. The crushing blow came when I discovered Jimmy sobbing behind the boat garage. When I finally got him to tell me what happened, my blood ran cold. Cousin Jacob said we're charity cases, he hiccuped. He said Grandma only invited us because she feels sorry for us, but nobody actually wants us here. That night, searching through my bag for pain relievers for Jimmy's headache, I found an old diary I'd accidentally packed. Flipping through it, I read entries from my teenage years, incidents with Lauren I'd half forgotten. Lauren told Dad I broke his fishing rod, but it was her. I got grounded for 2 weeks. Lauren accidentally spilled bleach on my prom dress. Mom said I should have kept it somewhere safer. Lauren told Richard I cheated on him with my lab partner. Had to show him all my text messages to prove I didn't. The patterns were clear. This wasn't new behavior. It was a lifelong campaign of systematic undermining and sabotage. And now she was extending the same treatment to my children. In that moment, curled on a cot in a garden shed, watching my children sleep fitfully, I realized we weren't just unwanted guests. We were deliberately invited targets. The third morning brought heavy rain that matched my mood. As we huddled in the shed listening to water drip through the leaky roof, I found myself transported back to similar childhood moments. The countless times Lauren had established her dominance while our parents looked away. There was the summer I was 12 when Lauren convinced our cousins I had lice so no one would swim with me. The high school graduation where she accidentally knocked over the display of my artwork during the reception. The college boyfriend who mysteriously decided I wasn't girlfriend material after a private conversation with Lauren. Pattern after pattern of subtle sabotage, always with plausible deniability, always with our parents' tacit permission. Lauren just has a stronger personality, my father would say dismissively. You need to stop being so sensitive, my mother would add. The flashbacks were interrupted by Jenna's small voice. Mom, I'm cold. I gathered my children close, sharing body heat under our single thin blanket. Let's find a warm spot in the main house, I decided. Maybe the library. We dashed through the rain to the back entrance, slipping quietly into the massive house. The library was mercifully empty, a fire already lit in the stone fireplace. The kids settled on the thick rug before it, warming their hands and drying their clothes. While they huddled there, I found myself drawn to the built-in bookshelves where family photos were displayed. Years of Reynolds family history captured in expensive frames, vacations, holidays, milestones. What struck me wasn't just my absence from recent photos. It was how even in older images I had been positioned at the edges, often partially cropped out. In a family portrait from my high school graduation, I was off-center, Lauren prominently positioned between our parents. In Christmas photos, Lauren held the prime spot on our father's knee or beside our mother while I was relegated to the periphery. Even in my presence, I had been positioned as an outsider. "What are you doing in here?" Lauren's sharp voice cut through my reverie. She stood in the doorway, perfect as always, in a cashmere sweater and tailored pants. "The children were cold," I explained simply. "The shed leaks." "It's just a little rain," she dismissed, then noticed the kids by the fire. "They're getting the rug wet. This is an antique Persian." "They're getting dry," I corrected. "As soon as they're warm, we'll leave." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "Jason needs this room for a business call in 15 minutes. We'll be gone by then," I promised. She lingered, clearly unsatisfied with my minor defiance. "I saw you looking at the family photos. Notice anything?" The deliberate cruelty of the question took my breath away. She wanted me to acknowledge my exclusion, to verbalize my outsider status. "I noticed how happy Dad looks in all of them," I said instead, refusing to give her the satisfaction. Lauren's smile tightened. "He was proud of those of us who contributed to the family legacy. He was proud of all his children," I countered. "He told me so the week before he died." A flash of something. Anger, worry, crossed her face. "Yes, well, deathbed sentiments are often generous. Real love is shown through actions and choices." "Like cutting your sister out of her inheritance?" I asked quietly, watching her reaction carefully. "You walked away from the business," she said dismissively, repeating the family narrative. "You chose that worthless husband and your art history degree over family responsibility." "Dad encouraged my education choices," I reminded her. "And he promised there would always be a place for me in the company." Promises made to a naive 20-year-old Lauren waved dismissively. "Before you married against all our advice and abandoned your family obligations. Is that what you told everyone after he died?" "That I abandoned the family." She didn't deny it. "I simply made sure the company survived. Someone had to take responsibility." By taking my share, I pressed. "There were debts, business complications," she said vaguely. "Jason can explain the legal details if you're really interested." Before I could respond, Jimmy approached us, his young face solemn. "Aunt Lauren, why do you hate us?" Lauren's perfect composure slipped for just a moment. "I don't hate you, James." "That's a very dramatic accusation." "But you called us maggots," he persisted. "And you put us in the cold shed. And you broke Jenna's special music box." Lauren's eyes darted to me accusingly. "You should teach your children not to eavesdrop or make accusations against adults. You should teach yourself not to be cruel to innocent children," I countered. The standoff was interrupted by Jenna's sudden cry from the fireplace. I turned to find Madison Lauren's 10-year-old daughter standing over my crying child. "What happened?" I demanded. "She's lying about Brooke pushing her," Madison said immediately. "She probably just wants attention." Jenna shook her head through tears. "She did push me, and she said I'm a charity case who doesn't belong here." Lauren immediately stepped in. "Jenna, we don't tell lies in this house. Apologize to Madison and Brooke right now." The injustice of it, the automatic assumption that my child was lying while her perfect offspring told the truth, ignited something primal in me. "No," I said firmly, "I believe my daughter, and we're done here." I gathered our few belongings. "Come on, kids. We're going back to the shed." Running away from conflict, just like always, Lauren commented as we headed for the door. Some things never change, do they, Hazel? I paused at the threshold. You're right, Lauren. Some things never change. Like your need to destroy anything that threatens your sense of superiority. Her laugh followed us into the rain. Always the victim, never the victor. No wonder Richard left. That afternoon, I found Jimmy sitting alone on the covered porch watching the rain. When I joined him, he leaned against me with a heaviness no 8-year-old should carry. Why did Dad leave us, Mom? He asked suddenly. Was it because we weren't good enough? The question gutted me. No, sweetheart, never that. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to protect. It's never the child's fault. Then why does everyone treat us like we did something wrong? I had no easy answer. How could I explain the complex dynamics of family scapegoating to a child? How Lauren had needed someone to look down upon to maintain her sense of superiority? How my parents had enabled it because keeping Lauren happy was easier than defending me? Some people feel bigger by making others feel smaller, I said finally. It's not about us being wrong. It's about them needing someone to be less than so they can feel more than. He considered this with the remarkable wisdom children sometimes possess. Like Madison and Jacob telling Jenna and me, we have to call them Sir and Miss. My heart sank. What? Jimmy nodded. Aunt Lauren told them to teach us our place. She said since you work for them now, we're like servants. The humiliation burned through me, followed by a cold, clarifying anger. This wasn't just about me anymore. Lauren was deliberately trying to break my children's spirits to teach them they were lesser beings who deserved their low status. That evening, I overheard Lauren on the phone in the kitchen, unaware of my presence in the adjacent hallway. No, it's going exactly as planned, she was saying. She's desperate enough to put up with anything. Yes, the children too. By the time the 2 weeks are up, she'll be begging for any scraps we offer. The perfect cautionary tale to show the kids what happens when you defy family expectations. The pieces clicked into horrible place. This wasn't just casual cruelty or thoughtlessness. This was a deliberate orchestrated campaign to break us down completely. Reynolds to use us as an object lesson for the next generation of Reynolds children about the consequences of defying Lauren's authority. We weren't just unwelcome guests. We were props in her power play invited specifically to be humiliated. As I slipped away undetected, I found myself back in the library, drawn again to the family photos. This time, I noticed something I'd missed before. A small photo partially hidden behind others on the top shelf. I carefully removed it to find an image that took my breath away, my father and me at my college graduation, his arm proudly around my shoulders as I clutched my diploma in art history. The happiness in his eyes couldn't be mistaken, nor could the inscription on the back in his familiar handwriting to my independent thinker, "Always proud of you for following your heart. Love, Dad." I carefully returned the photo to its hiding place, but took with me the certainty that my father had truly loved me exactly as I was. No amount of Lauren's narrative spinning could erase that truth. That night in our leaking shed, as my exhausted children finally fell asleep, I made a promise to myself and to them. We would not be broken by Lauren's cruelty. We would not accept the role of family scapegoats. Somehow, we would reclaim our dignity and our rightful place, not as supplicants begging for Lauren's approval, but as people worthy of basic human respect. Little did I know that the following day would push us beyond anything I thought we could endure, forcing a reckoning none of us were prepared for. The morning of our 4th day at the lake house dawned bright and clear. Lauren had announced a formal family photo shoot on the dock, orchestrated by a professional photographer she'd brought in from Chicago. Everyone wear blue and white, she instructed at breakfast, addressing the main table where the real family Saturday. We want a cohesive nautical look for the Christmas cards. When my mother tentatively suggested we might join the photos, Lauren's response was swift and cutting. These are for immediate family only, she said, not even bothering to lower her voice. Besides, they haven't brought appropriate clothing. The appropriate clothing had been deliberate, of course. Lauren had specified the color scheme in a group text that conveniently excluded me. But they are immediate family, my mother pressed weakly, perhaps finally feeling a twinge of conscience. Lauren's laugh was dismissive. Mother, be realistic. How would that look? They're not exactly presentable. The calculated humiliation continued as Lauren assigned me to kitchen duty during the photo shoot. Through the window, I watched my children sitting alone on the porch steps, watching their cousins pose with Grandma on the picturesque dock. My brother Jason appeared briefly in the kitchen, ostensibly looking for water. When we were momentarily alone, he spoke in a hurried undertone. "You should know what's happening," he said, glancing toward the door to ensure we weren't overheard. "Lauren's planning to announce her complete takeover of Reynolds Enterprises tomorrow at the business dinner. She's bought out my shares and convinced the board to name her CEO. Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely confused by his sudden confidence. "Because it was built on Dad's promise that it would support all of us," he said, guilt finally showing in his eyes. "You should have had a third Hazel. I know that. But Lauren, she can be persuasive and ruthless." "You let her cut me out completely," I said, the betrayal still fresh despite the years. "My children have been on food stamps, Jason. I've worked double shifts to keep our electricity on." He had the grace to look ashamed. "She convinced everyone you'd squander any inheritance, that Richard would take it in the divorce. And after the divorce, when I reached out for help, she intercepted your messages," he admitted. "Told us you were doing fine, just being dramatic for attention. The depth of the manipulation was staggering. So you all just wrote us off. Your own family." "I'm sorry," he offered inadequately. "If it helps, she's done the same to me now." The buyout was basically forced. She threatened to expose some indiscretions to Patricia. "It doesn't help," I said honestly. "But I appreciate knowing the truth." Our conversation was interrupted by Lauren's return. She glanced between us suspiciously before announcing lunch would be served on the terrace in 30 minutes. "We're having the Millers and their grandchildren," she added pointedly. "Jason, make sure Patricia knows to keep an eye on the children's behavior. We want to make a good impression." The unspoken message was clear: my children weren't invited. I prepared sandwiches for Jimmy and Jenna, planning to take them for a walk along the shore during the lunch party. As I assembled plates in the kitchen, Lauren entered with her son Tyler, who immediately spotted the cookie platter I'd prepared for the terrace. "Mom, can I have a cookie?" he asked, reaching for the display. "Of course, sweetie," Lauren smiled indulgently. "Just one before lunch." Jimmy and Jenna watched silently from their seats at the island. I knew what they were thinking. They'd been told the cookies were strictly for the guests, not to be touched before the party. "Can we have one too?" Mom Jenna asked hopefully. Before I could answer, Lauren interjected. "Those are for our special guests, not for everyday snacking." She turned to me with false concern. "Hazel, I'm sure you've brought appropriate snacks for your children. We wouldn't want to teach them to expect handouts." The deliberate cruelty of denying my children what she'd just given her own son made something snap inside me. I took 2 cookies from the platter and handed them to my kids. "These cookies that I baked are for all the children," I said firmly. Lauren's eyes narrowed dangerously. "We need to talk about boundaries, Hazel. And your role here." My role as what unpaid servant family scapegoat living cautionary tale? "Don't be dramatic," she dismissed. "We've been more than generous allowing you to stay." Generous, I laughed incredulously. You put us in a leaking shed and treated my children like servants. If you're unhappy with the accommodations, you're welcome to leave. Her smile was venomous. Oh, wait, you can't afford to, can you? How unfortunate. The naked cruelty in her eyes chilled me. This was what she wanted, to force me to acknowledge my dependence, to beg for scraps of her generosity. Mom Jimmy's voice broke through our standoff. I don't feel good. I turned to find my son pale and sweating, his half-eaten cookie forgotten on his plate. What's wrong, sweetheart? I asked, immediately going to him. My throat feels funny, he wheezed, his voice suddenly hoarse, and my tongue feels big. Horror washed through me as I recognized the symptoms. Jimmy, did the cookie have peanuts? He nodded weakly, eyes widening in fear. Jimmy was severely allergic to peanuts, something Lauren knew perfectly well. The cookies are peanut butter chocolate chip, Lauren said, watching with detached interest as Jimmy's breathing became more labored. I assumed you'd check before letting them eat anything. I lunged for my purse, frantically searching for Jimmy's EpiPen. You know about his allergy. You were at his 3rd birthday when we discovered it. Was I? Lauren examined her manicure with deliberate nonchalance. I can't be expected to remember every detail about your children's health issues. Jimmy was gasping now, hives breaking out on his neck. My fingers closed around the EpiPen, but as I pulled it out, I realized with horror it was expired. I'd been waiting for our insurance to approve the renewal. We need to get him to a hospital, I said, gathering my gasping son into my arms. Now? The nearest emergency room is 40 minutes away, Lauren informed me calmly. Perhaps you should have been more careful about what he ate. The calculated indifference in her voice made it clear she had known exactly what she was doing when she offered those peanut cookies. Call 911, I screamed, Jimmy growing heavier in my arms as his breathing worsened. Jason appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with alarm. What's happening? Jimmy's having an allergic reaction. I managed terror, closing my throat. His EpiPen is expired. To his credit, Jason sprang into action. I have one in our emergency kit. Tyler has a mild peanut allergy, too. As he rushed to retrieve it, Lauren's expression remained unmoved. Such a fuss. He's probably just looking for attention. Jason returned with the EpiPen, which I immediately administered to Jimmy's thigh. The relief wasn't immediate, but his breathing seemed less labored after a minute. We still need to get him to the hospital, I insisted, cradling my son. I'll drive you, Jason offered, keys already in hand. I'll come too, Jenna said, tearfully clutching her brother's hand. The ride to the emergency room was tense, Jimmy's breathing stabilizing but still concerning. Jason drove well above the speed limit, navigating the rural roads with grim determination. Lauren knew, I said quietly, stroking Jimmy's hair, as he lay across my lap in the back seat. She knew about his allergy. Jason's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. Hazel. Lauren wouldn't deliberately. Yes, she would. I cut him off. You know she would. This is just escalation of what she's always done. We reached the small regional hospital in record time. The emergency room staff took Jimmy immediately, his condition serious enough to warrant priority treatment. As they wheeled him away, a nurse gently pulled me aside. Mom, I need to ask some questions, she said, clipboard in hand. Has your son been under any unusual stress lately? The question caught me off guard. We're visiting family, I said carefully. It's been tense. Her eyes were compassionate but assessing. I noticed some concerning signs of emotional distress in both your children, and you're showing signs of significant stress yourself. I realized suddenly how we must appear. Exhausted, wearing rumpled clothes, clearly anxious. The nurse's expression held professional concern mixed with something else. Suspicion. We're staying with my sister, I explained, choosing my words carefully. The accommodations have been challenging. and the family dynamics are complicated. I see she made a note. And your son's EpiPen was expired because insurance issues, I admitted. I'm between coverage periods. The renewal is 3 times what it used to cost. She nodded, making another note. Miss Reynolds, I want you to know that our hospital has resources available for families in difficult situations, including temporary housing assistance if needed. The implication was clear. She was evaluating whether my children were in a safe environment. The irony was bitter. Lauren's deliberate cruelty had made it appear that I was neglecting my children. Hours later, Jimmy was stabilized and sleeping. Jason had returned to the lake house with Jenna promising to bring her back with fresh clothes for all of us in the morning. I sat by Jimmy's hospital bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Lauren says Jimmy had a reaction because you weren't supervising properly. She's very upset about the disruption to the luncheon. Please be more careful with the children. Not a word of concern for her grandson. Not a question about his condition. Just Lauren's narrative, accepted without question. Something broke inside me then. The last thread of hope that my family might someday accept us, love us, include us. In its place grew a cold, clear resolve. We were done here. Done with the humiliation, the danger, the deliberate cruelty. Whatever it cost me financially, whatever bridges it burned permanently, we would leave as soon as Jimmy was discharged. My children's safety, physical and emotional, was worth more than any inheritance or family connection. As I made this decision, a hospital social worker knocked gently on the door. Miss Reynolds, I'd like to talk with you about your situation. Something tells me you and your children might need some support. I had no idea then that this conversation would be the first step toward not just escaping Lauren's trap, but eventually reclaiming everything she had stolen from us. I expected the hospital social worker, a kind-eyed woman named Helen, to judge me. Instead, she listened, really listened, as I explained our situation in halting, uncertain terms. It sounds like you're describing a pattern of familial, emotional abuse, she said matter-of-factly, after I'd outlined the bare minimum of our experience. Possibly financial abuse as well if what you suspect about your inheritance is true. Hearing it labeled so clinically was oddly validating. This wasn't just family drama or personality conflicts as I'd been trained to think of it. I should have left immediately, I admitted, looking at Jimmy sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, finally breathing normally. But I had nowhere to go, no money for hotels or gas to get home. That's exactly how these dynamics persist, Helen explained. Financial control is a powerful tool for abusers. She provided resources, local shelters, emergency assistance programs, even a gas card donated by a local church to help with our eventual return to Chicago. But the most unexpected help came later that afternoon when a woman I vaguely recognized entered Jimmy's room. Hazel, I'm Sarah, your cousin on your mother's side, she introduced herself quietly. Jason called me about what happened. I placed her then, my mother's sister's daughter, about 10 years older than me. We'd met at family gatherings when I was young, but she'd moved away before I was a teenager. I didn't know you were in the area, I said, surprised by her appearance. I moved back 5 years ago after my divorce, she explained. Bought a little cottage about 20 minutes from Lauren's place. I've been invited to the annual gathering exactly once. Long enough for Lauren to make it clear I wasn't welcome back. The realization that I wasn't the only family member Lauren had ostracized was strangely comforting. Why, I asked. Sarah's smile was wry. I challenged her version of events regarding your father's will. Asked too many uncomfortable questions about where your share had gone. My heart quickened. You knew about that. I was at the reading of the will, she confirmed. I'm an accountant. The numbers didn't add up even then, and I said so. Next thing I knew, I was branded the troublemaker cousin who couldn't be invited anymore. She pulled up a chair beside me. But I've kept tabs on Lauren and the company. And I've kept records. Records of what? Financial transfers. Board meeting minutes I shouldn't have access to. Emails I probably shouldn't have seen. Her expression was determined. Enough to prove that your inheritance was deliberately diverted through a series of shell companies Lauren created. Hope and disbelief warred within me. Why would you do that for me? We barely know each other. Because it was wrong, she said simply. And because your father was kind to me during my divorce when everyone else in the family took my ex's side. He believed in fairness. She pulled out her phone, showing me photographs of documents. Lauren's been systematically looting the company for years, siphoning funds that should have been distributed to all shareholders, including you. Your father's will left equal thirds to all 3 children, but Lauren used her power of attorney during his final illness to restructure everything. The evidence was there in black and white, my name on original documents then conspicuously absent from later versions. Dates that didn't align. Signatures that looked suspiciously similar. This is fraud, I whispered, the implications sinking in. Yes, Sarah confirmed grimly. And I've been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right moment. I think that moment has come. As we talked, another surprise visitor arrived. R.A., Robert's mother, Beatrice Lauren's mother-in-law. An elegant woman in her 70s, she carried flowers for Jimmy and a determined expression. I heard what happened, she said without preamble. This has gone too far. She'd never been particularly warm to me, and I'd always assumed she shared Lauren's opinion of my branch of the family. I've watched how Lauren treats you for years, she continued, settling into a chair. I kept silent because Robert asked me to for the sake of family harmony. But endangering a child crosses every line. You believe she did it on purpose? I asked carefully. I know she did, Beatrice stated flatly. I overheard her tell Tyler to make sure Jimmy took a cookie. She said, and I quote, "Let's see how much attention the little prince gets when he has a reaction." The calculated cruelty took my breath away. Not just neglect or thoughtlessness, deliberate harm intended for my child. Why would you tell me this? I asked, wondering if this was another elaborate trap. Because I've been complicit through my silence, she admitted. And because my son has lost his way following Lauren's lead. This isn't the family Robert and I raised him to create. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. A local woman with gray-streaked hair poked her head in. Sarah, I brought those clothes you asked for. Hazel, this is Marge, Sarah introduced us. She owns the general store in town. And she's offered her guest house for you and the kids until you figure out next steps. Marge's kind face creased in a smile. Any enemy of Lauren Reynolds is a friend of mine. That woman's made half the town feel small at some point or another. Overwhelming gratitude filled me as I realized what was happening. For the first time, people were seeing through Lauren's carefully crafted facade and offering help without strings attached. I can't possibly accept, I began. Yes, you can, Marge cut me off gently. 20 years ago, I was in an abusive marriage with nowhere to go. A stranger helped me. Now, I'm helping you. That's how it works. While Jimmy continued to recover, my unexpected support team grew. Sarah retrieved our belongings from the garden shed, reporting that no one had even noticed us missing. Lauren had simply told everyone I was being typically dramatic about a minor allergy incident. Beatrice provided a statement about what she'd overheard while Marge introduced me to Sheriff Rick, who happened to be her nephew and had his own history with Lauren's entitlement. She tried to have my deputy's car towed from in front of her property last summer, he explained. Claimed it ruined her lake view, even though he was responding to a neighbor's emergency call. The sheriff took our statements seriously, particularly when Beatrice played a recording she'd secretly made after the cookie incident. Lauren laughing about teaching Hazel a lesson and dismissing concerns about Jimmy's condition. Deliberate endangerment of a minor is a serious offense, he noted, making detailed notes. Add in the unsuitable accommodations and food restriction as described by multiple witnesses, and we have a concerning pattern. By the time Jimmy was discharged the following day, we had somewhere safe to go and the beginnings of a plan. Sarah drove us to Marge's charming guest cottage, a small but immaculate space with actual beds, a working bathroom, and a kitchen stocked with groceries. I took the liberty, Marge said when I thanked her tearfully. My granddaughter is about your daughter's size. She left some clothes that should fit Jenna. And there are some of my grandson's old things for Jimmy. That evening, as my children slept peacefully in clean beds, Sarah spread documents across the cottage's small dining table. Lauren's announcing her complete takeover of Reynolds Enterprises tomorrow night, she explained. All the important clients and board members will be there. Jason mentioned that I confirmed. What Jason may not know is that Lauren falsified board signatures to push through the transfer of his shares, Sarah said, showing me more evidence. And she's been systematically eliminating anyone who questions her authority, and 3 board members have been forced out in the last year alone. So what do we do with all this? I asked, overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence. We could go the legal route, Sarah considered. File complaints with the SEC, pursue civil charges. But that would take years, and Lauren has the resources to drag it out indefinitely. So, Sarah's smile was determined. So we go with the nuclear option. We show up at her big announcement dinner tomorrow with copies of everything for all attendees. She'll never let us in, I pointed out. She won't have to, Beatrice said, joining our planning session. I'm officially a hostess of that dinner as Robert's mother, and I've added you both to the guest list. The plan took shape over the next hours. Not just to escape Lauren's abuse, but to expose it thoroughly and reclaim what had been stolen. Marge offered to watch the children. Sheriff Rick promised to be on standby in case things escalated. Lauren's built her entire identity on being admired and respected, Beatrice observed. Public exposure of her true nature is the one thing she can't handle. As we finalized details, Jenna appeared in the doorway in borrowed pajamas, looking uncertain. Mom, are we in trouble because we left Aunt Lauren's house? I gathered her into my arms, breathing in her clean hair, feeling the tension that had been constant in her small body begin to ease. No, sweetheart. We're finally out of trouble because we left that house. But they're our family, she said, with the simple confusion of a child who had been taught that blood connections should mean automatic love. Sometimes I told her gently, the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from people who hurt us, even if they're related to us. She considered this, then asked the question that mattered most. Will we be okay? Looking around at the small cottage filled with evidence of kindness from virtual strangers, I felt certainty for the first time in years. Yes, I promised her. We're going to be more than okay. As she drifted back to sleep, I returned to the table where Sarah and Beatrice waited. We weren't just planning a confrontation anymore. We were planning a reckoning. And for the first time since my father died, I felt his presence, not in Lauren's mansion filled with empty wealth, but here in this humble cottage where truth and justice were finally taking shape. The day of Lauren's big announcement arrived with crystal clear skies and a determination I hadn't felt in years. While my children spent the day with Marge exploring her garden and helping bake cookies without peanuts, I prepared for the evening's confrontation with military precision. Everything needs to be organized perfectly, Sarah insisted as we assembled packets of evidence. Lauren will try to dismiss this as jealousy or hysteria. We need irrefutable proof ready for every denial. We created individual folders for each board member and important client expected at the dinner. Each contained copies of financial records showing the diversion of funds, emails Lauren had sent outlining her plans to exclude me, and witness statements about her treatment of my children. I've included the hospital records documenting Jimmy's allergic reaction, I said, adding the final piece to each folder. Along with Beatrice's statement about Lauren deliberately triggering it. Sarah nodded approvingly. And I've organized the financial records chronologically. The pattern of fraud couldn't be clearer. While we worked, an unexpected text arrived from Jason. Lauren knows something's up. She's asked security to watch for you. Be careful. Can we trust him? Sarah asked skeptically. I think so, I said after consideration. He's been trapped in Lauren's web too, just differently. Around noon, Beatrice called with news. Lauren's filing a police report claiming you threatened her. Says she fears for her safety. My blood ran cold. That's completely false. Of course it is, Beatrice agreed. It's her preemptive strike. If you show up making accusations, she'll claim you're retaliating for being reported to the police. Fortunately, Sheriff Rick was prepared for Lauren's manipulation. When I called him in a panic, he was reassuringly calm. Already handled, he said. The deputy who took her statement happens to be Marge's son-in-law. He carefully documented her allegations, but noted there's no evidence to support them. She'll claim bias, I worried. Let her, he replied. I've been building a file on your sister for years. Complaints from local businesses about non-payment, harassment of service workers, even an incident where she tried to get a lifeguard fired for asking her children to stop running on the dock. The portrait of Lauren that emerged was consistent, a pattern of entitlement, manipulation, and vindictiveness that extended far beyond her treatment of me. In her quest for dominance, she'd created a wide circle of people with reasons to want her exposed. By late afternoon, our preparations were complete. I dressed in clothes borrowed from Sarah, a simple but elegant black dress that gave me more confidence than I'd felt in years. Remember, Sarah coached as we drove toward Lauren's lake house, she'll try to make you emotional, to paint you as unstable or vindictive. Stay calm, stick to facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. The lake house was transformed when we arrived. Valet parking attendants, caterers bustling about security at the entrance checking names against a list. Fairy lights twinkled along the path to the dock where a large tent had been erected for the dinner. Beatrice met us at the side entrance, elegant in blue silk. Robert's suspicious but cooperating for now, she reported. I've told the staff you're my special guests. How many people are here? I asked, suddenly nervous at the scale of the event. Board members, major clients, local dignitaries, business press, she listed. About 60 people in all. Lauren's pulled out all the stops for her coronation. We slipped into the tent, strategically positioning ourselves at a side table where we could observe without being immediately noticed. The space was lavishly decorated with flowers, crystal, and subtle Reynolds Enterprises branding. At the center table, Lauren held court in a designer gown, playing the role of triumphant CEO with practiced charm. My mother sat beside her, beaming with pride at her golden child. Jason and Patricia were present too, though. Jason's smile seemed forced as he continually glanced toward the entrance. Let her get through her speech, Beatrice whispered. Maximum impact. We didn't have to wait long. After the first course, Lauren clinked her glass for attention, rising with practiced grace. Distinguished guests, family, friends, she began, her voice carrying easily through the tent. Tonight marks a historic transition for Reynolds Enterprises. She launched into a carefully crafted narrative about my father's legacy, her own sacrifices, and her vision for the company's future. The selective truth was masterful, acknowledging my father's founding role while completely erasing my existence from the family history. As the new sole CEO and majority shareholder, she continued, I'm honored to announce an expansion that would make my father proud. That was our cue. As Lauren detailed her plans, Sarah and I quietly moved around the perimeter of the tent, placing evidence folders at each place, setting not yet occupied by guests. Beatrice created a distraction by asking the server for more wine, drawing attention away from our activities. And so Lauren concluded triumphantly, I invite you all to raise your glasses to the next chapter of the Reynolds legacy. As guests lifted their champagne, I stepped forward into the light. I'd like to propose a different toast. The silence was immediate and absolute. Lauren's face froze, mid-smile, her eyes widening in shock and rage at my presence. To truth and accountability, I continued calmly. Values my father held dear. Security, Lauren hissed, but Beatrice was faster. Before anyone moves, she announced clearly, I suggest you all look at the folders beside your plates. As co-host of this evening, I believe transparency is essential before any toast. Confused murmurs spread as guests opened the folders. Lauren's face contorted with fury as she realized what was happening. This is absurd, she spluttered. My sister is mentally unstable. She's been reported to the police for threatening me. Interesting timing on that police report, Lauren, I replied evenly. Filed only after you learned I had evidence of your fraud. The board chairman, a gray-haired man named Thomas Bedford, stood with my folder open in his hands. Miss Reynolds, these financial documents suggest serious impropriety. Are you prepared to explain them? They're obviously fabricated, Lauren dismissed, but her voice had lost its confident edge. Hazel has always been jealous of my success. The bank transfer records aren't fabricated, noted another board member examining the papers closely. Nor are these emails sent from your account detailing the diversion of funds. Lauren's gaze darted around the tent, seeking allies, but found only shocked and suspicious faces. Even my mother looked confused as she peered at the documents. This is a family matter, Lauren tried again, attempting to regain control. My sister has personal grievances that don't concern the company. Endangering a child with a known allergy is not a personal grievance, Beatrice stated firmly. It's potentially criminal. The mention of Jimmy's incident rippled through the crowd. Lauren's carefully constructed facade began crumbling visibly. That was an accident. I have your recorded conversation stating otherwise, Beatrice interrupted, holding up her phone. Would you like me to play it for everyone? Lauren's face drained of color. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she had no prepared response, no way to spin the situation to her advantage. In the tense silence, Sarah stepped forward. As a CPA, I've documented systematic financial fraud dating back 5 years. Reynolds Enterprises funds were illegally diverted, inheritance was stolen, and board signatures were forged. These are serious allegations, Thomas Bedford said gravely. If verified, they would constitute criminal activity. They're more than allegations, I added quietly. They're facts. Facts my father would have been heartbroken to discover. Lauren finally found her voice, though it trembled with rage. You have no right. You walked away from this family. You chose that worthless husband over us. I chose nothing of the sort, I corrected calmly. I pursued the education. Dad encouraged, married the man I loved, and expected to take my place in the company when I was ready, just as Dad planned. Dad changed his mind, she insisted desperately. The notarized letter I found in his personal files suggests otherwise, Sarah countered, pulling out another document. This letter, dated 2 weeks before his death, explicitly confirms his intention for equal shares among all 3 children. As the evidence mounted, Lauren's composure shattered completely. In a move that shocked even me, she lunged toward me, screaming accusations. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done, this company would be nothing without me. Security personnel moved quickly, not to remove me as Lauren had planned, but to restrain her as she lost all self-control. "You were nothing," she shrieked, as they gently but firmly held her arms. "A pathetic failure with your useless degree and your worthless children. Dad knew you'd ruin everything." Her public meltdown accomplished what even the documentary evidence might not have. It revealed the true Lauren Reynolds behind the polished facade. The guests watched in stunned silence as she continued ranting, exposing her contempt, not just for me, but for many in the room. "Lauren, that's enough." Robert finally intervened, his face ashen with embarrassment. "You need to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down," she spat. "They're trying to destroy everything I've built, everything." As security escorted her from the tent, the remaining guests sat in shocked silence. Thomas Bedford recovered first, addressing the stunned room. "In light of these concerning developments, the board will convene an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Until then, this event is concluded." As the guests began dispersing in murmured confusion, my mother approached me for the first time. "Did you know?" I asked her quietly. "About what Lauren did to my inheritance, to my children." The conflict on her face told me everything. She had known, perhaps not every detail, but enough. She had chosen to believe Lauren's narrative because it was easier than confronting the truth. "Lauren said you wanted distance from the family she offered weekly, that you needed to make your own way, and you believed that I asked, not bothering to hide my hurt. Even when I reached out for help after Richard left, she had no answer, just tears that came too late to mean anything." Jason approached next, looking both relieved and terrified. "I should have stood up to her years ago," he admitted. "I was a coward." "Yes," I agreed, simply. "You were." As the tent emptied, Sarah Beatrice and I stood in the aftermath of the confrontation we had orchestrated. The exposure was complete, the truth finally laid bare after years of careful concealment. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly uncertain despite our victory. "Now," Sarah said firmly, "we make sure the consequences stick." And as we walked away from the shambles of Lauren's perfect event, I realized that the real victory wasn't just in exposing Lauren's fraud or reclaiming my inheritance. It was in finally breaking free of the narrative she had created. The story where I was always less than, always undeserving, always the family failure. For the first time in years, I was writing my own story, and it was just beginning. 6 months after that explosive night at the lake house, I stood in the doorway of a small but charming storefront in downtown Chicago. The freshly painted sign above read "Reynolds and Williams Gallery," my name alongside Sarah's in elegant script. "Still can't believe it's real?" Sarah asked, joining me with 2 coffee cups in hand. Sometimes, I admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. After so many years of struggling, this feels like someone else's life. The gallery represented everything Lauren had tried to deny me: financial security, professional fulfillment, and most importantly, dignity. Using my portion of the family inheritance finally restored through the legal settlement that followed Lauren's exposure, Sarah and I had created a business that combined her financial expertise with my art history background. We specialized in affordable art for new collectors, with a side program offering free art education to underprivileged children. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd finally found a way to use the degree Lauren had ridiculed as worthless. The months following the lake house confrontation had been turbulent but cleansing. The board of Reynolds Enterprises had conducted a thorough investigation, ultimately removing Lauren as CEO and filing civil charges for financial misconduct. Criminal charges were still pending, though Lauren's expensive legal team was fighting to avoid prosecution. More significant than the professional consequences were the personal ones. Lauren's carefully constructed social facade had crumbled completely. Former friends distanced themselves, business associates denied close connections, and her invitations to elite gatherings mysteriously disappeared. "Mom, the new shipment is here," Jimmy called from inside the gallery, his voice strong and confident. At 9, he'd blossomed in the months since our escape from Lauren's toxicity. The fearful, withdrawn child from the lake house had transformed into a curious, enthusiastic boy who eagerly helped with gallery operations after school. Jenna, now 7, sat cross-legged in our children's corner explaining a painting technique to a younger visitor with the patience and clarity of a born teacher. Both children attended a good public school near our new apartment, making friends and participating in activities we could finally afford. "Looking at those two, you'd never know what they went through," Rachel commented, arriving for our scheduled lunch. My best friend had been an unwavering support throughout the aftermath, offering her guest room during our transition and helping us find our new apartment. "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel safe," I replied, watching Jenna laugh at something her new friend said. "Once they understood that what happened wasn't their fault, they started healing." My own healing had been more complicated. Therapy sessions twice weekly helped me process not just the lake house trauma, but the lifetime of subtle and overt emotional abuse that had preceded it. I'd joined a support group for family scapegoats, finding validation and understanding among others with similar experiences. "Have you heard from Jason?" Rachel asked, as we settled at the small cafe table we'd installed in the gallery's front window. "He calls weekly," I confirmed. "He's still trying to make amends." Jason's path since the exposure had been rocky. His marriage to Patricia hadn't survived the scandal. She'd filed for divorce within weeks, unable to accept their reduced social status. But the crisis had forced him into his own journey of self-reflection. He'd entered therapy, acknowledged his role in enabling Lauren's behavior, and was slowly rebuilding his relationship with me and the children. "And your mother?" Rachel pressed gently. "That relationship remained the most complicated. Deborah Reynolds had lost her bearings when her carefully maintained family mythology collapsed. The daughter she'd placed on a pedestal had been exposed as manipulative and criminal. The daughter she'd dismissed had risen from the ashes. "We're taking it slow," I said carefully. "She comes for Sunday dinner twice a month. She's trying in her way." The truth was more nuanced than I could easily explain. My mother was a product of her generation and upbringing, trained to prioritize appearances over authenticity, to value success over integrity. Her complicity in Lauren's behavior stemmed partly from fear. Fear of losing status, fear of confrontation, fear of acknowledging painful truths. "And Lauren?" Rachel asked, lowering her voice, though the children were out of earshot. "No direct contact," I replied firmly. "My attorney handles any necessary communication." Lauren had attempted various approaches in the months following her exposure, threatening legal action, offering financial settlements to put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us, and finally, when those failed, sending tearful messages claiming she'd changed and deserved another chance. I had declined all contact. Some family relationships were beyond repair, and I had finally accepted that maintaining distance from Lauren was not just self-protection, but necessary healing. The bell above the gallery door chimed as a familiar figure entered, Beatrice, elegant as always, in a simple blue dress. "Just stopped by to see if my favorite gallery owners need anything," she announced, embracing me warmly. "And to remind you about dinner on Thursday." Beatrice had become an unexpected but treasured part of our reconstructed family. After divorcing Robert, who had chosen to stand by Lauren despite everything, she had found her own voice and purpose, becoming a vocal advocate for family abuse survivors. "We'll be there," I promised. "The kids are excited about using your pool." Our circle of chosen family had expanded in ways I could never have imagined during those dark days at the lake house. Sarah and Beatrice, of course. Marge visited whenever she came to Chicago. Sheriff Rick kept in touch with holiday cards and occasional calls. Even some extended family members had re-established contact, admitting they'd believed Lauren's narrative about me, but now wanted to know the real Hazel. The gallery phone rang, and Sarah answered with our new professional greeting, Reynolds and Williams Gallery, where everyone's story deserves wall space. It was our philosophy in business and in life. The belief that every story, even those society often dismisses, deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. That was the Chicago Tribune, Sarah announced after hanging up. They want to feature us in their Women in Business section next month. Another victory, another step in reclaiming my narrative. Lauren had spent years ensuring I remained invisible, erased from family photos and memories. Now I was building a visible, impactful life on my own terms. As afternoon sunlight streamed through the gallery windows, I watched Jimmy carefully unpacking a ceramic sculpture, his movements methodical and confident. Nearby, Jenna had moved to our small reading nook, absorbed in an art book twice her size. The pain of our lake house ordeal would never completely disappear. There would always be scars from Lauren's cruelty and my family's rejection. But we had transformed that pain into purpose, using it to build something beautiful and meaningful. You know what Dad used to say, I'm used to Sarah. That the strongest structures are built on the deepest foundations. I think our foundation was being dug all those years we struggled. Now we're finally building. Sarah smiled, understanding the journey it had taken to reach this point of peace. Your father would be incredibly proud of you, Hazel. Not just for reclaiming your inheritance, but for breaking the cycle of toxicity for your children. That evening, as I tucked my children into beds, in our modest but comfortable apartment, Jimmy asked a question that revealed how far we'd come. Mom, are we still part of the Reynolds family, even though we don't talk to Aunt Lauren anymore? I considered his question carefully. We carry the Reynolds name and all the good parts of that legacy. Grandpa's integrity, his creativity, his belief in helping others. But we've also created our own family with people who choose to love and respect each other. Sometimes that's more important than sharing the same last name. Like Sarah and Beatrice and Rachel, Jenna clarified. Exactly, I confirmed. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them, who celebrates your victories, and helps you through hard times. As they drifted toward sleep, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From standing frozen on Lauren's porch, hearing her cruel rejection, to building a life filled with genuine connection and purpose. The path hadn't been easy. There were still difficult days, moments when old insecurities resurfaced, times when the children asked painful questions about why their aunt had been so cruel. But we had found our way forward. Not by forgetting or minimizing the past, but by acknowledging it, learning from it, and refusing to let it define our future. In the end, Lauren's attempt to destroy us had instead set us free. Free from the toxic family dynamics that had imprisoned us all. Free to create authentic relationships built on mutual respect rather than fear and obligation. Free to define success on our own terms rather than through others' approval. As I closed their bedroom door, leaving it cracked just enough for the hallway light to filter through, I silently thanked the cruel words that had started our journey. Why did you come with your maggots? There's no room. Get lost. Those words intended to crush us had instead become the first step toward finding our true home. Not in a lakeside mansion built on lies, but in the authentic connections we'd created from the ashes of rejection. And that was a family legacy worth building. What's your experience with family dynamics? Have you ever had to create boundaries with toxic relatives or found chosen family more supportive than blood relations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else feel less alone in their journey. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about family healing, boundaries, and personal growth. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their well-being over harmful family connections. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and restoration. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful growth happens in the spaces where we've been broken. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.